Are not on our mailing list and didn't receive this brochure in the mail, I hope you'll take one. There are some on the seats, there are some on the tables around the room, but I hope you'll take it home and take a look at it. We've got over 20 programs this winter on an incredible, diverse group of subjects, from consciousness to hot topics, geopolitical, unlimited adventure, and we hope that you'll come back and join us. I also hope that if you have a good time tonight, that you'll tell people about it, because we want to just keep adding more seats, because we go to all the work to bring these wonderful speakers, and we want everybody to take advantage of the opportunity that they're here. So if you can help us spread the word, you're the best advertising. It doesn't matter how many emails we send, how many ads we take out in the Vail Daily. When you tell your friends that, you know, that was really interesting, you should go to the next one, I heard about this one coming up, that's the best, and so we appreciate your help with that. So speaking of that, our next program is on the 28th, so it's 2 weeks from tonight, the 28th of December. It's on Bitcoin and digital currency. So I want to see a strong show of hands. Who in the audience could really explain Bitcoin? That's what I thought. Yep, that's what I thought. So that's why you should come to the program. We've got two incredible experts, one from the Federal Reserve and one who's very involved and has been involved with digital currency since it started. And they're going to fill you in on everything that's going on. And you can't open the paper these days without seeing something about Bitcoin. Tonight's program is part of our Unlimited Adventure series, and we do this in sponsorship with the Vail Public Library. We want to thank them for their support. The next program on the Unlimited Adventure series is on January 17th. It's with Tommy Caldwell, the rock climber. You probably remember about a year and a half ago, he was climbing El Capitan, and they were sleeping out, and it took them about a week to get up there. So he's going to be here to talk about his life and career in climbing, specifically that, and his book, The Push, which is his memoir. So a great addition to the Unlimited Adventure series. And then lots of other great programs. The last one I'll tell you about is on January 4th. It's called From Gaddafi to Chaos. So again, if you're watching what's going on in the world, Libya, ISIS, it's in the news every day. It's obviously an incredibly hot topic for us, and we have a wonderful expert to come in and share his thoughts on that. We couldn't do any of this without the support of our donors and our sponsors. Tickets cover about 15% to bring all of these speakers and for us to be able to keep our ticket prices affordable. And that's a huge part of our mission. We want everybody who lives here to be able to come and partake in these programs. And so if you are not a donor, I would encourage you to consider it. And you go, well, I could only give, $10. $10 makes a difference to us. $10,000 makes more of a difference to us. But everything in between is also important. So we do have some envelopes here. It is the end of the year. As I say, give early and give often. But we appreciate any support. I just want to thank a few people that helped make this possible. 4 of our key sponsors are the Town of Vail, the Vail Daily, the Antlers Hotel, and Vail Resorts Epic Promise. I also want to thank Dale and Jeannie Mosier, who are the underwriters for all of our programs this year. Could we give all of those people a round of applause? I'm going to turn this over to Scott Carney. I'm not going to say much. He's going to tell you about him, and he'll do a much better job than I will. I'll just tell you I was listening to him speak about, in last February on National Public Radio, and it was a driveway moment for me. I pulled over and I sat and I listened to the whole thing, and then I immediately tried to figure out how we could get him to come and share his story with our community. So I'm going to turn it over to Scott. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for coming.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, we're going to start off with a little video that explains a little bit of the book. It was the trailer that I released right before, and then we'll get into it. I traveled to Poland to expose a charlatan, a prophet who claimed he could give ordinary people superpowers. He said he could control his body temperature at will, hijack his immune system, and conquer the world's tallest mountains with no cold weather gear. I'd built my career as an investigative journalist debunking people like him. But to prove he was a liar or a madman, I had to try his method. I'm not an athlete, I'm not exceptional, but I found a power that I never knew humans had. I hiked to the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro without a shirt. I sat on the snowy bank of a river until the ice melted around me. I trained with top athletes. I crossed the finish line of the world's most notorious cold weather obstacle course race wearing nothing but shorts and a smile. I could do 80 push-ups on a single breath, and I lost 7 pounds of fat in 7 days. If I can do it, anyone can. Thank you very much. Yeah, I was pretty happy with that trailer. So I'm Scott Carney. I'm an investigative journalist. I am I've written for Mother Jones and NPR. I've been shirtless in Playboy. And written a couple books before this one. One was about organ trafficking. One was about cults. And the one that was about cults was about how meditation can kill you. Kid you not, this is what I wrote about. And the reason I'd gotten into that was because I had been leading an abroad program in North India back in 2006 when one of my students who was very into meditation climbed up to the roof of this retreat center after doing a 7-day silent meditation retreat, and she jumped to her death. And the reason she did that was because she thought that she had achieved some sort of transcendence during this silent meditation, some sort of superpower that often happens when you sit on that meditation cushion. You have these feelings of, oh my God, time is speeding up and slowing down. Oh my God, the colors are changing, and maybe this means I'm special. And so that book was looking at all of the people out there who start to feel they're so special, that they're getting something which is superhuman. And so I'm sort of a critic of what you might call, whoa, hello? a sort of a critic of what you might think of as any of these pursuits. But fast forward to 2011, I'd been working in India for years looking at these cult issues. I'd written a book on organ trafficking, and I was entering my early 30s, and I was getting a little fat, the stomach coming over the belt. I was looking at a future where, maybe old age just means sort of this steady decline, and the only thing you can do to stave it off is to run to Whole Foods and eat in the organic aisle every now and then, and that's the best you can do. I'm cynical. And then I was looking at the internet. This is Southern California. This is 72 degrees all the time at that point. I was living in Long Beach. And I opened my computer, and there was this picture of this dude sitting on an iceberg somewhere north of the Arctic Circle, and he was 20 years my senior at least. And I was like, what the hell is this about? Like, part of me was like in awe, because I was like, that looks really cool. And part of me was like, this is bullshit. There's no way that you can really do this. And I did some more research into him, and his name was Wim Hof, a Dutch fitness eccentric, a fitness guru, you could say, who said that he could teach anybody to have this extreme resilience to the cold. And not only that, have conscious control over their body's automatic processes, their autonomous nervous system, that he could control his fight or flight response. He even said that he can control his immune system at will. And that was just bullshit to me. That was just another guy saying, here's some superpowers and give me some money. And so I took a commission from Playboy to fly out to Poland, where he had this training center, to check out his methods myself. And so I took this van ride with him, and it's about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, into the mountains, into the middle of this Polish winter. And to give you sort of an analogy here. This is the same sort of winter that stopped the Nazi blitzkrieg, right? This is the same one that stopped Napoleon's army. This is a cold winter. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to get killed, right? This is definitely going to happen. But as a journalist, I don't actually necessarily need to participate, right? I could just sit on the sidelines and write from the background and be like, okay, this is crazy stuff. Look at this crazy stuff this guy's doing. But I do feel like it's important to give someone a chance. I feel like you can't just go out there and say, this is all bullshit. You have to at least, try and sit with it. And I had this moment where the night before the training starts, I'm sitting with Wim and we're playing chess, and I beat him in chess. And we're talking about the cold. And I realized that there's something really sincere about his belief in what he's doing. And also going through my mind was the image that I first saw when I arrived at this dilapidated training center in Poland. And it was like, it's this old farmhouse up in the mountains. Is when I got out of the car and I walked up and I stashed my bag, I look outside into this snowy field in the back of his house, and there's this dude standing out there in his underwear, throwing snow on his chest like this, and there's steam coming off of his body. And I'm like, how the hell does that happen? What is going on? What sort of alternate reality am I getting into? And no, I don't want to go do that. Meanwhile, the Latvian guy who slept with the Kalashnikov immediately went outside and was rolling in the snow. So here I am surrounded by crazy people. And then came the next morning, the training session, right? This house is frigidly cold. It's actually heated by a coal furnace, which I'd never actually seen a coal furnace before. You actually shovel coal into it. And so, and Wim had not shoveled coal into the furnace the previous night. So it was really cold. And so what we did is we went into his sort of, I guess, yoga studio room place. And we got in our sleeping bags. And he said, we're going to just teach you the breathing method right now. And this was really interesting, because I'd studied some breathing methods. I don't know how many of you do yoga or heard of pranayama or box breathing or these various breathing. Breathing can really open up all sorts of ways to communicate with your body, because half of it is autonomic and automatic, and half is you can consciously do something. So it's this really great intersection point for you to sort of look at your body. And what we did was we started essentially hyperventilating. Not like that panicked, oh my God, that tiger is chasing me, I'm going to die, hyperventilating, but like that. Okay. And, we're back. Okay. And I knew that I could usually hold my breath 20, 30 seconds, something like that. And after this hyperventilation, and then with empty lungs, I held my breath for about a minute, which I thought was pretty cool. And then we do another round. I forget exactly how many rounds we did, but maybe 5 or 10. And by the end of it, I was holding my breath for almost 3 minutes at a stretch, which was really cool. Again, empty lungs. And then he said, now do this one more round of breathing. And then immediately I want you to let all the air out. He said, let all the air out of your lungs and just start doing push-ups. And so, okay, great. I knew at that point, remember this is the overweight me in Long Beach. I could do 20 push-ups. That's what I could do. Don't criticize. That's it. I'm very embarrassed. And I did this breathing, and without breathing, I did 40, and they felt really easy. And I was like, wow. With just this breathing thing, he did something to my body that allowed me to double this athletic output. And that was this sort of aha moment where I was like, all right, I'm going to give this Wim dude a chance. Because he obviously knows something. It's not magic, but it's something that's really cool. And so the other part of the Wim Hof method was to do the snow stuff. And so he's like, all right, let's go, strip down. And we all got into our bathing suits. And he's like, we're going to go outside. And we're going to stand in the snow for 5 minutes. And I was like, 5 minutes? I'd never, ever put my feet in the snow. And I was like, that's going to be really painful. And he's like, it's going to be really, really painful. And I was like, great. And so we go and we stand in the snow, and we're like this, and we do this sort of Wim Hof, sort of pseudo Tai Chi movement. I don't know if you need to do it, but he really likes it. And we do that, and having never put my feet in the snow before, it was horribly painful. It was like I was on coals. It was just terrible. I would say don't try this at home, but later I'm going to tell you to try this at home. And then he's like, okay, after 5 minutes, he actually made us stand there 6, so I still haven't forgiven him for that. And he's like, all right, we're going to go into the sauna, because he had a sauna, and we'll warm up. I was like, great, that's exactly what I want. And we go into the sauna, and it hurts even more, because warming up really cold tissue is just also painful. So at the end of that, what he said was like, great, that's sort of your introduction to this. Every time you do this from now on will be much, much easier. And lo and behold, and the training is really not much more than what I just told you. It's really like hanging out in the snow or some other cold area and doing some breathing in the morning, and you just do that. And, the next day I stood in the snow, and before that same horrible, painful feeling set in, I could last 10 minutes. And the day after that, it was 20 minutes. And the day after that, it was 40. And at the end of the time, I was like an hour. I was like, this is fine, whatever. Because the body really adapts super quickly to the cold. And we did these things where I sat on the bank of a river, and I think there was a photo in there of me doing that, right? I sat on this bank of this snowy river, and the snow melted around me. Nuts. And we finished that week-long trip with climbing up this mountain called Snezko, which is like a ski slope, not unlike Vail. In fact, I have an idea for a field trip. Climbed up to the top of it in just a bathing suit. I had shoes and a hat on. It got down to 2 degrees Fahrenheit, and I was boiling the entire way up that mountain. And this sort of resilience comes in so quickly. And here's the question that is really important. Are these superpowers, or are they something else? And the answer is absolutely not. These are not superpowers. These are biological human powers that every single one of us has, that is simply the product of evolution. And what has happened is that we have lost them over the course of modernity. Most of us today live in this perpetual climate of about 72 degrees Fahrenheit. That's like room temperature, pretty normal, where we feel comfortable, where we could be in our bathing suits in our house. Where you go even warmer? And 76, I'm hearing, is also what's warm for us. Yeah. When I was in college, I turned it up to 80 because I was like, this is great. The thing is we live in this very static environment, and it doesn't matter if it's a blizzard outside or if it's scorching hot. We have an air conditioning system that will lower the temperature, and we have a heating system that will bring it up. And because of that, we have been outsourcing bodily mechanisms that we have to the environment that we have created. We instead of relying on our biology, we're relying on our brain power and our technological outputs. And AC and heating really have only come up in the last 100 years, maybe. The very first ones, and really only the really rich people had those. This is so new to our species, because our species, Homo sapiens, us, we're 300,000 years old. In that time, we constantly had to deal with variations in temperature, variations in altitude, various environmental hazards. And you are all the descendants of evolutionary winners. Because those people who were like, yeah, my body doesn't want to adapt to this snowstorm coming in, I'm sorry, I'm just going to give up. They didn't pass on their genes. They are not you. Which is great, because that means we have this underlying dormant biology, and it's that we're just not activating it. And I want to give you an example of what just some of these powers are. Because if we're not using this biology, what biology is not being used? Well, remember when I'm jumping into the snow. That hurt not just because I hadn't stepped in the snow before, but we have this process called vasoconstriction. And in your body, you have about 60,000 miles of tubing, arteries and veins. Arteries take the blood away from your heart. Veins bring them back. And the arteries are lined with stuff called smooth muscle. And smooth muscle's job is to constrict, to, when you're too cold, bring your blood back to your core so you don't die of hypothermia. And this is just an evolutionary response. Almost all mammals have it, and you do too. But the only way to trigger vasoconstriction is to get cold. Like, very few of you probably right now can look at your hand and say, vasoconstrict, do it. It might be possible, but you're not going to be able to do it, especially if you've never been exposed to the cold repeatedly. So this is just one autonomic system. You have to get cold to trigger that. And it's really just the tip of the iceberg. We have evolutionary adaptations for altitude. All of you are here at Vail, 7,000 feet, something like that? So 8? So you're producing more red blood cells because you're up here. You're not thinking, I need more red blood cells like stat. You just produced them. You go down to sea level, you'll lose them. We have heat adaptations. In the extreme heat, if you go out a lot, you sweat more, you have more evaporation, you have more perfusion in your limbs. And that's so that you don't overheat. But if you don't use these systems, they just don't activate. You just don't get them. So there's this story that I like to tell, and it has to do with Thanksgiving, which we all just had. And I'm not just talking about the immense amount of food that we all just ate. When the Pilgrims landed in, 92? Is that right? 1620? Right. They landed in 1620, Plymouth Rock. I grew up in Providence, Rhode Island, so right south of Cape Cod. The winters are quite cold and damp and moist, heavy snow. And they sat, they parked their boats, they broke them down, they built their little huts, and they didn't see anybody for the first 3 months they were there. Come March, this dude walks into the middle of their camp. This is March on Cape Cod, windswept, probably snowy, not nice place. He shows up, and he's just wearing a loincloth, okay? And he says, welcome, welcome, Englishmen, in English. And then asks, do you have any beer? Now, as Puritans, they didn't have any beer. Wrong question. And the way that Samoset learned English, that's a whole crazy other story, and I suggest looking at Wikipedia, but he was kidnapped by cod fishermen in Maine early in his life and somehow learned English. Who knew? But he introduced himself to the Pilgrims, and the Pilgrims were so shocked at his outfit that the first thing that they did was gave him a winter coat. And he was like, sure, thanks for the coat, but where's the beer? What was it about Samoset at that time that made him so resilient to the elements? What was it about the indigenous people at the Tierra del Fuego that Darwin first encountered, who showed up at the boat also in loincloths? Tierra del Fuego is even colder than Plymouth Rock. What was it about these people who can just exist basically naked in the elements and be fine, whereas their Westerner counterparts are not? Well, one of the mechanisms, other than this vasoconstriction business, is something called brown fat or brown adipose tissue. And the Algonquin, at that time in Plymouth Rock, would put their babies in the snow for 15 minutes a day and then bring them back inside. It's a similar tradition to what Nordic countries do, Norway, Finland, Sweden. They'll keep their kids out in cribs. What this does is, by exposing them to cold at a young age, they build up this incredible heat tolerance where they can directly metabolize fat, and by which I mean white fat, that sort of spare tire, for heat energy. Now, we knew that brown fat existed in Western populations. Every baby who's born, if you think about it, is loaded with brown fat, because babies, honestly, they suck at living, okay? They have terrible thermogenesis. The way you and I heat ourselves, we have a really good circulatory system. Theirs isn't any good. We have a digestive system. Theirs isn't any good. And we have muscle movement. That's how we keep our 98.6. Babies don't have any good muscles. What they do have are rolls and rolls of baby fat. And along with that, especially along their thorax and shoulders, they have this stuff called brown adipose tissue. And the only way that they survive into adulthood is by literally sucking that white fat, those baby rolls, out of their system and directly metabolizing it for heat energy. Now, we knew that babies had brown fat. This is a well-known anatomical thing. We just didn't think that humans had it. And we didn't discover this until 2007, when a researcher at Harvard was looking at PET-CT scans for cancer patients, which detect metabolically active tissues. And they were always seeing these really weird blobs in the thorax and shoulders that they were reading as false positives. And when the scientists went back to look at like old-timey anatomical textbooks, they found that those deposits lined up perfectly with where brown fat is. And the reason why this was happening was because cancer patients put into cold little nightgowns thrown into PET-CT scans in these air-conditioned rooms were feeling cold, and the brown fat was actually actively trying to heat them. It's just that in the West, we usually have pretty anemic brown fat because our parents never threw us in the snow as kids, right? Instead, our parents would say, don't go outside, you're going to catch a cold. But the kid is usually like, no, I'm really too hot. I really want to be out there. That's because their biology is actually, they're listening to what their body is saying. They're not listening to this sensation that we have, this drive that we have for comfort and homeostasis. So what I learned here in this process is that conditioning in the snow can start to give us control over our metabolism. And in fact, when brown fat was discovered, the National Institutes of Health created a research directive, and we have been funneling billions of dollars to create a pill that you can take and ingest that will activate and grow your brown fat so then you can lose weight. They figure it's going to totally help diabetes and just our general collective waistline. But you know what else can do that? The snow. You can, since we are pre-programmed to encounter the environment, and the environment triggers not only this brown fat stuff, this vasoconstriction stuff, this general also resilience, because the first time you go out there and you feel that pain, it's actually not real pain. A lot of it's this phantom pain, this idea of like, oh my God, it's going to feel so cold. And it hurts more when that happens. Oh, interesting. I forgot to put something in there. One of the things that's been so interesting, in addition to these physical resilience that you have in the outdoors, is also what happens to your autonomic nervous system. Now, remember when Wim Hof said he could control his immune system at will? Well, they tested him on this. He said to an immunologist in Holland that he could consciously turn off his immune system, which was biologically impossible, which is considered a complete anathema to science because we don't have conscious control over our immune systems. But he said it was possible, and they said, sure, okay, we're going to give you a test. And so they designed this test where, and it's the same test that you use to test an immune rejection drug. So if you had got a kidney and they just implant the kidney into you, your body will then reject the kidney by eating the kidney. And then you could die from this because it detects a foreign body. So what you do is you take a drug that turns off your immune system so that you can keep the kidney. Immunosuppressive drugs. Now, to test whether those drugs work in the first place, well before we're doing organ transplants, what they do is they give someone the drug, and then they inject them with something called endotoxin. Endotoxin is heat-killed E. coli bacteria that your body senses as a foreign invader, but it's actually not that dangerous for you. But when you get it, you get what we call a primary immune response, which means a fever, which means achy joints, which means everything you feel like when you get the flu. Now, if the drug works, you don't get those symptoms, you just are fine. And if the drug doesn't work, you get the symptoms. Okay? Wim said he had the drug and the drug was his mind. So they did it. They put him into a lab. They gave him the drug, and lo and behold, he had no response to it, which was amazing, which was groundbreaking, which broke what we thought about the body in the first place. And of course, because he's just one person, there's a very good chance that he was a freak. And as I said, he's definitely a freak. So how do we know if it's just his general freakiness or real biological abilities? Well, the next year, and this was actually, when this happened was 1 week after I was in Poland, they brought 30 Dutch college students. 10 were a control group, so we'll just forget about them. And they took these 20 people, they did the same training I did in Poland, which is the breathing, the rolling in the snow, the meditating with the snow melting around you, and then hiking up that mountain. And then they took them all back into the lab, they injected them all with endotoxin, and they all had the same response, which was no response to the immune rejective drug. Which means that Wim was right. With cold exposure and this breathing protocol, you can turn off your immune system. Now, Wim makes a lot of other claims that have not been tested, so I won't go into them here, but he says this does a lot more than that. But what I do know is, having traveled around Holland and met with a lot of people who do this method, I've seen people, and I write about this in the book, people who have reversed rheumatoid arthritis. So that's an immune response, right? That's when your joints your immune system starts eating your joints. And they've been able to reverse that, where they would have things the size of plums, joints the size of plums go down to manageable grapes with this method. I've seen people who've managed the symptoms of Parkinson's disease, which is not autoimmune, but still pretty amazing, and Crohn's disease, where we're talking about ulcers going from your mouth all the way to your rectum, and just with cold showers and breathing, they were able to reverse these things. Now, why is that possible, right? Why does that work like that? And here's the theory. We evolved with this constantly varying environment, and we have an immune system which is partially controlled by our fight or flight responses, the sympathetic nervous system, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the resting side of us. This immune system is somewhat linked to them. And we also were exposed to a million other pathogens, where we have a very clean environment now, right? We don't have bacteria all over the place. We're not exposed to parasites in the same way we were in the olden times. And what the Wim Hof method does is gives you stress. It gives you something for your body to fight against, where right now we're usually just pretty lazy. We don't have anything to fight against. And if you think about the immune system as, let's say, a pack of wolves, right? It's this pack of wolves that's on your side, but they're sort of hard to control because they're wolves. And they're running all around your body, and they're going after the things that wolves eat, which is definitely bacteria and viruses, right? Because this is totally medical. These wolves are going around, and look, they don't have anything to eat, so we're going to go eat your joints, and that gives you rheumatoid arthritis. Oh, we're going to eat your digestive tract. Here's have some Crohn's disease. That's really your immune system, these wolves, going after you. And doing something like the Wim Hof method, where you're controlling your sympathetic responses, is like giving those wolves chew toys. Just gives them something to do. And it works. It really, really works. And I highly suggest you look into this more after we're done talking. So here's the thing. We used to think about human health as resting on two pillars, right? If you just ate the right foods and moved your body in the right ways, you're going to be healthy, right? This is the standard model. Eat some calories, you won't get too fat as long as you burn off stuff. But the Wim Hof method and my journey has shown me that there's a third pillar of human health, which is the environment that you inhabit. Is that what you do with your day when you're not worrying about eating or exercise is also super, super important. And the environment talks to you in a million different ways all the time.
And what we're trying to do is make you conscious of that. Trying to say, look, when you jump into ice water, what is your response? Well, your response is probably like, oh my God, get me out of this ice water, right? I mean, whose isn't? But it's also this clenching feeling, this tight thing. And that is your muscles saying, we're going to go heat you with shivering. And it's a normal response, right? You shiver yourself warm. But if you jump into that ice water or a cold shower, and instead of tensing up, instead you say, okay, I'm going to relax. I'm just going to relax in this, and it's going to be okay. And I promise you, a cold shower will not kill you. I wrote a book with that title, okay? So what you do is when you relax, your body doesn't say, okay, I give up, I'm going to go die right now. Thank you very much for killing me. It says, great, you're not allowing me to shiver myself warm. I guess I'll go use that old metabolism thing, dust it off and try to use it. And so what you actually do is, and it's not just one cold shower, it's gonna do this, it's sort of more prolonged work, but what you do is you turn on your metabolism and you start telling your body to that spare tire, what your body's been trying to do is to save that to heat you up, but you've never tried to heat yourself up with your metabolism, and it works. That is just fuel. And then you're suddenly hacking your body. You're telling your body how to work because you're relaxing in this stressful environment. With the breathing, it's interesting the same way. When I'm hyperventilating and I'm exhaling all the air bubbles and holding my breath, what I'm doing is I'm extending my gasp reflex so that, that urge to breathe, you're able to delay it longer and longer. And then you're telling your body, okay, you actually didn't need to breathe this early. You were wrong. So your body's like, okay, here's have a little more control. Because obviously, it was up a little better than me. It's not going to make you superhuman. You're not going to be able to stop breathing. But it's going to give you that more elasticity in it. So what can you do? Well, one, I highly suggest you guys all learn the breathing method. There's YouTube videos, there's courses, super easy to do. I can give you a very quick intro right now, which is you do 30 long, deep breaths. And you should be lightheaded after all that. And then you let it all out and you hold like that. And the first time, it's not going to be so great. You're not going to get some huge magical thing. And you do it again and again and again, and you'll hold your breath for a lot longer. Just keep doing that. That is the essential breathing method. At the end, you can throw in some push-ups if you want to see many more push-ups you can do. Or leg lifts, or anything that's not like standing, because you could pass out doing this stuff. Another thing you can do is turn down your thermostat, right? You're comfortable at 76. I challenge you to try 66. And 66, I know. And honestly, it's not wonderful the first time you do it because you're going to feel cold. That feeling of cold is the sensation of your metabolism starting, right? We think of it as pain, right? We think of that, oh my God, it's cold. It's the sensation of your body doing work. So get used to it. It's not so bad. Another thing you can do is take a cold shower. Again, you can start warm. It's all right. Get in there, turn on the hot water, soap yourself up real good. And then do the hardest thing any human has ever done in the history of humanity. And turn over and turn that knob all the way cold. And sit there for 30 seconds, a minute. And what you're doing there is not panicking. You're not going to do the thing that you want to do, which is like, oh my God, this is horrible. I hate Scott. Which is what you're going to do at first, right? What you do is, and you relax. And it's just like any time you've ever jumped into the ocean. It's fine. It's totally fine. In fact, after you get out, your body is so amped up, you usually feel good because you've released all these feel-good endorphins. And you're like, this is great. You could also, if you ever get snow here, which I think you have some, right? When the snow happens, you can roll around it in your bathing suit. Yeah, I know it sounds horrible, but it's really not that bad. Or just stand in it if you've never stood in it before, to get your feet in it. Like literally try to do a little bit of that thing that makes you uncomfortable, because that comfort is what is killing us. And you're not going to do it forever. I'm not telling you to become snowmen, right, or snow ladies. Do it a little bit. Give yourself some of that invigoration and try it. And I've also found that when I'm outdoors, in my bathing suit, I'm actually a lot warmer than I am when I'm outside and I'm wearing just a t-shirt or a light sweater. And that's because I have more nerves touching the outside air, and that's a stronger signal to my body to be like, okay, this is serious. We're gonna start ramping up. And this is why when I climbed up that mountain, Mount Snezka, I was boiling the whole time. And certainly my muscles were working and that's one way to build up heat, but it was more than that. And at the end of this journey, and I did a 6-year journey studying the Wim Hof method, I climbed up Mount Kilimanjaro in just a bathing suit and a hat. For most of the time, there were some times I put on a sweater, but for most of the time I was just in a bathing suit. The temperature went down to -20 Fahrenheit. I lived. All my things are still on, which is great. So that's what I'm saying. These are human powers. They are not superpowers, and they are something that any of you can build to some degree. You know, you can start. The younger you are, if you're 5 years old, you're going to be a superstar at this. As you get older, it's more difficult, but you're never out of it. There are people who are doing this who are 70 years old and who are getting into it and finding themselves get much stronger. So I highly suggest you do this. How much time do we have left? 5 or 10? All right. Now, what the real technique is here is not just cold exposure and breathing, right? These are two external stimulus that you then control yourself in. But there's something deeper about the Wim Hof method. And oftentimes I don't like when they call it the Wim Hof method because it's really just a Wim Hof set of principles because he changes his method every 30 minutes. But I want to give you the principles, right? And it's when your body has an innate reaction, an innate response that you have some control over, you can practice this. And it's what I call the wedge. And it's where you put your intentions in between your body's autonomic programming and your conscious biology. And by ramming this wedge into that space, you start gaining more control over your body. And I think this is a fundamental biological human thing where we start learning from kids when we are basically like Jell-O in a crib, and we're like, oh, what are those things? Well, at that point, your arms are basically autonomic. You don't know what's going on with them. This is you. At some point, we were thinking, okay, let's start using that stuff, and we sort of pushed these, and we learned our body. And at some point, we just stopped learning our bodies because we don't need to learn more, because we have technology, because we have comfort, because we have a life that has allowed us to live till now. And your body's not like going to give you more control because our body's pretty lazy. It's like, no, I'll take care of that. Don't worry about it. And one thing you can think about is, let's say you have a sneeze coming on, right? You feel that like tickling in your nose, a little thing like this, right? And you know that in 10 seconds you're going to go, achoo! It's going to come out. But you also have this ability, right? You could be like, I don't want to sneeze. I'm not going to do it. And honestly, I love sneezing, so I never actually do it with sneezing. But you can. And you can be like, okay, I'm going to just practice. I'm just going to stop sneezing. Well, that's the same thing as going into the shower and saying, I'm not going to shiver. It's the same thing as someone tickling you. And you're like, I'm not going to be ticklish. It really is the same thing. And any bodily system that you have, you can interfere with what I call the wedge. And that's what and one of you is going to ask this, so I'll just answer it for you now. What are you working on next, Scott? I'm trying to look at all of the other ways that we use this wedge. And what I've realized is that it breaks in two ways. One is what we call now grit in the world, right? Grit is like force, like, oh my God, there's a big snowstorm out there. I'm going to just walk through it and force myself through it, because if I don't, I'm going to die. And that is like, this is what our soldiers and our sports teams all want. We want grit. Grit is force, and that's one way to break into your nervous system. It totally works. The other way, though, that the wedge works is what we call flow, which is where instead of fighting the world, and we get into that point where we just use the energies around us and just start doing it. And maybe, I don't know, do any of you guys ski? You've all experienced flow, where you're going down the mountain and you're not thinking about your next turn. You're not like, I'm going to make this run. And you're like, yeah, I'm just feeling, I'm in that groove. The environment and me are one. And you sort of get this almost meditative out-of-body space. That's also the wedge. You're also just sort of finding that connection to the world around you. And when I jump into this water, I don't grit myself. I don't be like, oh, I can fight this as much as I can. I say, I'm going to relax and I'm going to see what happens. I can feel it. And that is a very powerful signal you can send to your body. And it also leads me to think that, grit is about being me, and I am so strong. I am so good. I can fight this snowstorm. And then there's this other one where when I climbed up Mount Kilimanjaro, I didn't get there just because I climbed up Mount Kilimanjaro, sort of because the mountain let me do it. Because I am connected to that environment, and because every neuron in my body, which is sensing the outside world, is really just sort of an extension of that outside world. It's just all trying to get along. And so that's where I'm going to next. And I'm looking at this through all sorts of weird things. I'm looking through breathing protocols, virtual reality, where you create sort of synthetic environments and then try to trigger autonomic responses, electricity, sex. I'm looking at flow by using this weird exercise with kettlebells, where you throw kettlebells to another person and try to get into this communal state of catching, something that could definitely break your foot. I do it with my wife. She's sitting back there. I'm looking at food, fasting. What happens? What hunger is the other big thing, right? What happens when you defeat hunger? And I have some cool tricks for that. I'm looking at float tanks. And then I'm looking at this whole new space of psychedelics, which is just really weird, and sort of scares me, but it could be fun. All right, well, that's what I'm talking about. I'd love to open this up to questions. Oh my God. Great. Yes.
I listened to your book twice.
Oh.
Your talk is very nice, but this is the tip of the iceberg of the book, and I recommend all this for people out here, health and fitness is a big deal to get, and also the Oregon transplant book.
The which one?
Your Oregon
Red Market, yes. Mm-hmm.
And you also spent time in the book interviewing several other so-called experts. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if you could comment a little bit on Brian McKenzie.
Oh, Brian's great. Brian is the founder of High Intensity Interval Training, CrossFit Endurance, which is, he basically teaches that if you want to train for a marathon, you don't do it by running lots of miles and just logging more and more and more miles. What you do is do really short workouts that are like just going to kill you. And then, 5 minutes of sprinting at your hardest actually helps you prepare for the marathon a lot more. I love Brian. He's a great guy. He was interesting for my book because he was also using ice training, also using underwater training to try to change the way his breath protocols work. He's great. He has this new program out called Art of Breath, which is, talking about different breathing techniques. He's obviously very well versed in the Wim Hof method, but he's also getting more interested instead of the hyperventilation, which decreases your CO2 because you blow off carbon dioxide. What he's trying to do is now get more used to carbon dioxide in his body so that he can perform better in anaerobic situations. So he's a body hacker. I love the guy.
So I'll bring this around. You put your hand up and I'll bring it to you. But Morris, thanks for your question. You mentioned the book, and I just wanted to say before we get into this that our other partner for this program is the Bookworm of Edwards, and back here we have Scott's book. And so when we're finished, it's a great present for yourself, or if you're looking for that. But Scott will be back there. You'll get a chance to meet him and have him sign the book for you. So if you just raise your hand, I'll bring this to you. Just hold it close and don't turn anything on or off. Okay?
Yeah, it's also available in audiobook, and it's all over the place. Read well. Yeah.
Scott, did you also mention that this is beneficial for Parkinson's?
Yes. But I honestly don't know why it's beneficial for Parkinson's. So in the book I talk about a guy who's using it to manage Parkinson's. And so here's the problem with the scientific paradigm that we live in right now. If you want to get something with the best amount of evidence possible, which is absolutely what we should do, you need to invest about $1 billion to do a randomized clinical control, and there's really isn't money out for the giant studies, you know, where 1,000 patient studies to really tell us what is going on. And even worse than that, medicine generally wants to treat one particular acute problem. And the Wim Hof method falls more into this wellness bucket. It's like, if you fix the overall body, all things will be better. Not, you have Parkinson's, this is the cure for Parkinson's. So there's a paradigm problem there. Also, ice water and breathing are very hard to make a lot of money on, right? You know, there's no pharmaceutical pill that's going to do it. And the sad thing about this is we'll never get the amount of scientific medical evidence to back up all of this, because we just don't live in an economic world which would facilitate, and that is a true shame. But there is nonetheless a lot of great science that's going on at the university level with 10, 20 people, where they're trying to apply the Western model. Is this good for anxiety? Is this good for arthritis? Is this good for diabetes? And they're trying that. It's just going to take a long time, and I wouldn't expect great results anytime soon just because of that paradigm. But what I can tell you are anecdotes, and anecdotes are not the best evidence, but it's what we've got. And I met this guy named Hans Spans in Holland, who has Parkinson's, has had Parkinson's for, at this point, 13 years. And the thing with Parkinson's is you sort of, in the worst case scenario, or get sort of locked into your body in a perpetual cramp, and you don't really have access to the rest of you. And so we have various interventions, either electrical stimulation in the brain or various drug protocols to sort of give you more control of your body and stave off the sort of the worst cramps that come up. And I think Parkinson's actually presents in a lot of different ways, so this is why it presents for him. What he said is that he was looking at a future where he would have to take more and more drugs to control his symptoms. You take more and more drugs, and eventually the drugs stop working and there's nothing you can do, and then you have this very steep decline. What he found was with the Wim Hof method is he was giving himself enough external stimulation that he was actually taking less and less drugs in order to maintain the same amount of activity as he had before, which is really great. Why it works, I can guesstimate. I give you some bro science on why it works, but you know, it has worked for him. And I know a lot of people who are trying this for Parkinson's. Yeah.
Yeah, when you're climbing Kilimanjaro in your
Can you wave your hand? I don't see you.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, when you're climbing Kilimanjaro in your swimsuit, are you eating 2 or 3 times the number of calories as everybody else to create the brown fat?
I wish. No, Wim was sort of, and you'll see there's this big drama point at the end of the book where Wim, we're supposed to break for lunch, and he's like, yeah, we're just going to go up without food. And we're like, what? You're going to get us killed. And half the group mutinies. And, no, sorry, 90% of the group mutinies. It's me, one other dude, and him who sort of go up the mountain. I'm going there because like I have to write this damn book, you know. It was sadly one of my motivations for doing that. What was very interesting as we were going up, I had a granola bar in my bag on that final ascent, and I ate the granola bar, and for the first time in my life, I realized. Like I felt my arms and legs getting nutrients in a way that I'd never felt it before. Like I was like, oh my, and I'm sure like you marathoners and people who work on the edge, you guys know how this works as well. But yeah, I was like, oh my God, I can feel the nutrients move my legs. And it was pretty cool, yeah. Yes?
How is this similar or different than self-hypnosis?
I've never done self-hypnosis. I won't know, but I think I've done some guided hypnosis before. What really is your question? And that's very general. I mean, I think that there's a power of the mind, right? And hypnosis is trying to break into it. The thing with Wim is it's not just mind first. We have these Tibetan monks. Maybe you've heard of Tumo, which are monks that are able to. They study Tibetan Buddhism. They're from Drepung Monastery in Tibet, and they will sit in the snow and melt the snow around them, I can do that too. And they'll also do the thing where they throw a bucket of water on them and they will dry off that robe. And this is in the Himalayas. It's crazy. It's really amazing stuff. The way Puma works is you start with the meditation. It's a lot of visual. There's a breathing method, but it's also like this visualization of the goddess or God, and then you visualize the letter, and it's like this very complex mind first, then to do the body. Right? Wim is the exact opposite of that. He's body first, and then you train the mind. So you jump into the ice water, and what are you going to control? You're going to control your autonomic bodily response to that ice water, and then you're going to gain control over that reflex. The Tibetans do it the opposite way. They go mind first, and then, okay, now we're really powerful. They both are great methods, but Tumo, to get to be a master at that, takes 20, 30 years. Wim Hof method makes 7 days. So I don't know. As an American, as someone who grew up with fast food, I like the 7-day approach. Yes. Oh.
Yes. The question kind of comes in the context. Something I've been reading about. There's a issue with the curve, kind of biological evolution, and like the technology curve, and like kind of comforts, and that like we are at a point where people need to continually like find ways to stress their bodies. And I guess the question is that, have you read anything about what I'm talking about, and how do you see this fitting into that, a way to stress your body? And there's other ways to do so.
So this is controlled stress, and this is controlling your stress response. So we have this nervous system, we have the parasympathetic and the sympathetic sides of our nervous system. And the sympathetic is, oh my God, I saw a tiger, I'm gonna go run and, or beat up the tiger. You won't win, right? But that's that system's for. And the other system is sort of resting and digesting and taking care of other sides. Right now, our sympathetic nervous system almost never gets organically activated. We don't see enough tigers. We don't go outside enough. And so that because it's not stimulated on the regular, it sort of misfires, and we start, you look at your 401k and you have the same response as to seeing a tiger, and that's really not the way that bodily system was supposed to be used, right? Everyone's like, 401k got you, didn't it? But these responses are meant to throw you adrenaline, throw cortisol, throw these like big active motion things. But when you're looking at your 401k or your healthcare bills or so many things, you're just going like this and you're fretting. And so all of those systems are firing in ways that are not giving you the physical response that they're supposed to get. So that's one way to answer your question. There's also this other concept which is very popular right now, which is called hormesis, which means it actually derives from ancient Greece, which is where you would give someone, let me explain this another way. Have you seen The Princess Bride? Yeah, iocane powder. Does that mean something to you, right? Okay, so iocane powder is this fictitious poison that if you take it, it'll kill you. But if you just take a little bit of it, and a little bit of it, and a little bit of it, you get immune to it. So that's what we call a hormetic response. You take something that's bad for you, and then you become resistant to it. But interestingly enough, sometimes when you take something bad for you, it makes you much stronger than you should be. One example, you could think about exercise, right? Exercise is like tearing these muscle fibers. That's a stressful, bad thing for your muscles. But if you do it and you don't hurt yourself while doing it, you actually get bigger muscles. That's also hormesis. Weirdly, you can get arsenic on bird eggs. And if you give a bird egg just a little bit of arsenic, they hatch much more regularly, much more robustly. If you give it too much arsenic, they all die. But these are what we call hormetic responses. And I think that's another way to think about controlled environmental stress as well. I think I could take that question in like 100 different ways. So you got two. Yes.
A hypothetical question that somebody might run into. You're on Holy Cross. It's January. You've got normal hiking gear, and it's 20 degrees out, and you get lost. Mm-hmm. And this hypothetical person hasn't trained like you have, mm-hmm. and is lost for 2 days and freezes. It gets down to 10 degrees at night or 0. Can you give us an idea of how the outcome might have been different had the person been you, and with the same clothes, but the very different training and physical condition, the outcome might have been different?
Well, I think there's a lot of things going on in that hypothetical example that are there's so many factors that I don't know, right? Am I lost? Can I get back to civilization? I think having hope is important, is what I mean by this, right? Is if you give up hope, you may not mount that resilient response. And you know, I can say that I can realize that I can do it. I know that I can survive. But I also know that every time I think about going and lying in the snow or climbing up a mountain in my shorts, I think to myself, this isn't really going to work, is it? I don't think it's going to work. I always still have that doubt in my mind, even though I've done it before, because that's sort of a natural thing. So, and I've never been in that survival situation, but I do think that there's something very important about not giving up, which is really, really critical. And that feeling of resilience, you know, that saying I can make it is super important. I mean, there's a couple examples in Russia that I can think of. There's this one story of a guy who was on a sort of one of those Trans-Siberian train rides, and he was Russian and probably drunk and smoking a cigarette on the back of the train, and somehow got knocked off the train, and the train rode away without him. And he was in bath slippers and a robe. But he was Russian, so he was tough, you know? And he walked, I think, 30 or 40 miles down the tracks in that outfit and lived, right? In Siberian, you know, properly, negative, too much cold outside. And I think that not giving up is very, very important in this. And do I know if I would live in the wilderness? No, I might get eaten by a bear. I don't know how to deal with bears. Yes, yes.
So you're talking about getting used to the cold. What about getting used to heat?
Same process.
Like I'm never cold.
Oh, great. Well, you're done. All right.
No, but I overheat.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely overheat to where it's like, you know.
It's the same exact training with heat. You know, you could go to a sweat lodge, saunas, that sort of thing. The problem with heat training is it's much more dangerous than cold training because it's easier to warm up a cold body than it is to bring down the temperature of an overheated body. So you have to be much more careful just because of heat stroke, right? Heat stroke can kill you. And you know, I remember this thing that happened in Arizona where 5 guys died in a sweat lodge. That happens. It's not as likely at all in the cold for that to happen. That's why this training is so good. But this training, Wim says, doing the cold training helps you with heat tolerance. I don't know, maybe that's true. I haven't really done extensive tests on that. I will say that the US Army, before they would send people to Iraq, would send people first to Arizona for at least a week to 2 weeks of climate training. And in that time, their protocols are that you should work out in that heat, not to the point where you pass out, but to be physically active, not just passive in that heat, but to be physically active and engaged is going to give you more tolerance, more resilience overall. And so for the Army, it's a 1 to 2 week protocol before they would send them out. And they found that it drastically reduced heat stroke and that sort of casualty.
I can't really regulate. It seems like so hot.
Yeah.
So I tend not to, I love the cold.
Yeah.
Going into the heat anywhere, it's like,
Try a sauna and engage in it. Like, be present in that sauna and be attentive to your body. Don't just like zone out and have a chat with your friends, but like be there. And you know, the Wim Hof method is all about paying attention to your body, all about paying attention to how you're reacting and then controlling those reactions. And heat, the reactions are not as obvious, right? I don't know how to control my sweat glands, right? I can control a shiver, but you know, in principle, it's the same. Yeah, yeah.
A short question and a long question.
Were you wearing shoes when you went up Kilimanjaro?
Yes.
You weren't clear about that.
Yes, I was wearing shoes. I sometimes put a hat on. There were times when it was probably negative 20 to 30 where I put a sweater on. But you know, a sweater, I feel okay with that. Okay.
Yeah. How many days to get up?
28 hours. So usually it takes 5 days to get up Kilimanjaro. And what our goal was It was actually, the cold was not the main part of the ascent. It was about the speed of the ascent. And usually, it's a 5 to 7 day ascent up Kilimanjaro. And the reason why only 60% of people make it to the top is because of altitude sickness. And what we wanted to do was show that the Wim Hof breathing protocols can be useful for conquering altitude sickness. And so when we asked the Dutch Mountaineering Association how many of us would make it to the top, they predicted a 100% fatality rate. That was scary. The U.S. Army was a little more generous. They said 70% of us would not make it at all. We would have acute mountain sickness, have to go back down the mountain. We had an 80 or 90% success rate on it. And what the technique was, and if you ever have altitude sickness, which you're probably pretty well acclimatized, but if you start getting that dizzy feeling, the dimming of the world feeling, the headache feeling, what you can do is just breathe more rapidly. And so what we did is we did the Wim Hof breathing with no retentions from the base of the mountain at 4,000 odd feet all the way up to the top. And we were just breathing like this for 28 hours, which was intense. But it works. And it was most noticeable on those final ascents where you're at 18-ish thousand feet. And what happens, you get these headaches and the world literally, it's like you're wearing sunglasses or you've moved the f-stop on the camera too far in the wrong direction. It's like that. And then you just do the breathing and you just perk right back up. And yeah, I think that this is a great method if anyone's struggling with that.
Longer question.
Question.
Yeah, you
Does
have an
anyone else have a
audience
question?
here. I'm enticed to learn more about this. Do you expect us in any way to inquire and then pursue and try it out, or should we just take this intellectually and say that was a
Do it. Take a cold shower. Do it tomorrow morning. Get in the shower and get cold. Make sure your skin's red at the end of it. Do it. And that's so easy. Everyone has it. And I want you to think about the environment in an important, real way. The takeaway of this isn't go buy my book, although definitely go buy my book. Buy books for everybody. But more importantly, it's like take control of your health. More importantly, think about your own body. And if you had to choose between you paying attention to your bodies or buying my book, don't buy my book, pay attention to your body, okay? That's much more important. Because and sensations are there for a reason. Like a lot of doctors will ignore your sensations. I feel pain in my shoulder. Yeah, you don't really feel pain in your shoulder. Or I have indigestion. Okay, we don't know what that means. Sensations are your body telling you that stuff is going on. And if you pay attention to them, maybe that's a good thing. I think that we are given these evolutionary abilities and they're there for a reason. And with the Wim Hof, you're paying attention to the sensation of cold and then you're controlling that sensation. Yeah. Yes.
I was just curious, having to do with his question a bit, but what about at the nighttime on Kilimanjaro? Mm-hmm. I mean, did you put a lot of clothes on?
I was in a sleeping bag.
But you kept your shorts? Like, what if you got up to go to the bathroom?
It wasn't a problem. It was fine. When I was sleeping, I had a big thermal Arctic bag, and I was in that. And then we were in like a cabin, and then we would sleep, so we weren't doing the breathing while we were sleeping, obviously. We would then wake up, I think 3 times a night and did a couple of rounds of the breathing. And we kept the windows open because we didn't want to flood the room with the CO2 of our exhaling.
Okay.
Okay.
So you're saying pretty much the breathing guided the rest of it?
Yeah.
That in a way seems like it's like the mind guiding the body. I'm just trying to get a grasp.
Well, the breathing is both the body and the mind. Breathing is the best, right? Because breathing is autonomic and it's conscious, and it's our insertion point into this conversation. When the Buddha started teaching meditation originally, he said focus on the breath. And it's because it is that inflection point. It's the thing that is so natural. But if you don't think about breathing, you will do it. And if you think about breathing, you could think about every breath for the rest of your life. That is a really, really important insertion point. And so is it body or mind first? I don't know. What is breathing? Yeah. Yes?
I've been thinking about frostbite, so I was wondering how you avoid it.
My nipples were chafed at the end of it.
That's different.
I didn't get frostbite.
Right.
Yeah.
Did anybody?
No one got frostbite. Wim has gotten frostbite. Wim got frostbite on his Arctic marathon. At the end of it, he had frostbite, and it turned his toes black. The doctor said they would have to amputate, and then, literally, this is his story. He breathed it away. All right. So, and which is crazy, but there are photos, right? And there's doctors who have backed this up. What he did was he did this conscious breathing, and it's a different sort of technique. I actually don't go into it in the book, but it's conscious breathing, and it's directing with muscular action, so squeezing and then in your stomach, and then pushing down to that spot in his body, and then sort of flooding his toes with warmth, and also that like voodoo, I visualize it going to my toes. So he was doing that too. And he did that for like 5 or 6 hours a day for like 3 months, and it went away. Do I think this is a clinical protocol that you should all do? No, I think it's bananas, and I don't know if it really works. This is just his story. But how do you prevent frostbite? You should be generating a lot of heat in your body. You're using a lot of calories, you're using a lot of energy. But the Wim Hof method does not make you impervious to the elements. In the battle of you versus nature, I promise you nature will always win, right? Which is why the question that was over here earlier, how would I survive in the wilderness for 3 days? I really don't know, because I have more resilience, but it has given me just more area to play with. It has not made me Superman. So that's my answer. Yes.
Hi. It seems like breathing is the key. It's not just throwing yourself in cold water, but it's the breath and integrating that. And I've had training programs and coaches that have been doing the nasal breathing and saying that when you breathe through the nose, that's where you live in the parasympathetic. But when you're out running and you're going, then it shoots you into the sympathetic. But yet the breathing you've been doing has been through your mouth. So why does he do mouth versus nose?
They actually teach the method in like 9 different ways. There is a nose version of it. You get more air moving through. And I will say that it is both cold and breathing. The Wim Hof method does not work with just breathing or just cold. You have to have both, because they're both talking to your nervous system, and they're both saying, okay, we're going to delay this gasp moment, okay, with the breathing, and we're going to shut down the shiver. And those two things together give you a lot of control. So it's not, I think the breathing for me is very, very powerful, but it would not work without the cold.
Is that why you can be out skiing and be shivering for 8 hours and I never warm up because I'm not doing the breathing?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
First time questioner, long time listener.
This is my wife, everyone. This is my wife.
If you are starting a breathing method, should you start it sitting up or standing up?
Okay, no. She's a leading question. Okay. When you do the breathing, do it lying down. And actually, when I was even doing those 3 breaths standing here, I even got a little lightheaded doing it. It's because your blood pressure is different here than if you're prone. Also, if you do the breathing, there's different sorts of retentions you could do. If you do a full lung retention and then try to do push-ups, you'll do more push-ups than you can usually do, but you're 10 times more likely to pass out. That's just the way the body works. And passing out is a possibility in the Wim Hof method, because you're really lightening your mind, and you're getting a little bit confused, and you're trying to control yourself in this confusion state. You can definitely pass out. So always do it lying down. If you do pass out, don't worry, you're just going to wake back up in a second. I've done it a few times. You're fine. Because your autonomic system then kicks on, and then it takes over.
Scott, is there anything else you want to say? Otherwise, I think we'll wrap it up. And I will ask, because I know a lot of you will want to come and talk to him, but we want to let Scott get back there so that the people who are going to purchase a book can get in line. So if you want to talk to him, you don't have to buy a book, but you do have to get in line.
All right.
Okay?
I like it. All right. Thank you very much. This has been a lot of fun.
Thanks, Scott.